if we don't have the energy for kindness, I think we should be asking ourselves, where are we spending our energy? The world that we live in, the values that the world has, it's encouraging us to spend our energies in other places. Maybe part of the whole question of kindness is to reevaluate, where are we expending our energy that leaves us empty when it comes to expressing kindness to those who are given to us?
Hi, I'm John Cuddeback.
And I'm Sofia Cuddeback.
If you're wondering whether you can really be friends with your spouse
And raise children into responsible adults with whom you have a relationship.
and do what it takes to make a homestead, reconnecting with your body and the land wherever you live,
If you just want to think more about how to make a truly happy home in our trying times,
then the Intentional Household, a LifeCraft podcast, is for you. Join us. Welcome, everybody. Always great to be here with my wife, Sofia. Today's topic is kindness, discovering its centrality. In a podcast that we did a little while ago called 5 Non-Negotiables in Raising Your Children, something to that effect, we talked a bit about kindness and the importance of kindness in the household. And so I think it's worth our going back and really trying to dig a little more deeply into kindness, use some authors that we've read before that have helped us on this, and share some things we've seen in life. But I think we can discover here that while everyone would recognize kindness is somewhat important, I don't think we give it its due as really being very, very important in human life.
Yeah, I'm so excited to kind of dive a little bit deeper here, because I think this is definitely not a subject that is absent from the world that we live in. As a matter of fact, it seems like everyone's very much talking about kindness, being kind, being kind, being kind, being kind. And yet I'm not sure that we're kind of really experiencing the effects of all this quote unquote kindness. And so I wonder if we do need to kind of circle back and kind of say, what is kindness really? What's at the heart of that? Because somehow in the trying to be nice to everyone, we seem to be missing something of the richness, or in any case, I mostly see it in the effects. It seems like kindness should be something that is making a more peaceful, more happy, more secure environment. And all the niceness doesn't seem to be producing that. So I think I'm really excited to talk about it today.
And I think we definitely need to go deeper and kind of what is it in its root, its origin, or even its essence. But also, I think this will be a very good opportunity for us to ask, do we come across as kind? And part of that is not that the very essence of kindness is in any particular physical action or appearance. But nonetheless, I think this can be a great opportunity for some self-reflection. Would people really experience us as kind? Do we have the external habits that go with the internal disposition of kindness? So I do think, as all the most important things in life, it's going to be fundamentally an interior disposition, but have very specific external manifestations. Even if they vary, it calls for specific external manifestations, which are key to not just expressing it, but to really doing it. In other words, it demands these external expressions. And there's often, again, a very good practical way to start. Hey, let's look at, and I'm going to suggest that we do this. For instance, what's the first thing that someone sees on our face when they come upon us? What are our physical habits of how we interact, how we present ourselves? The words that we say is a huge part of life. And a lot of it can be brought under this notion of kindness.
Yeah, while you were speaking, it just struck me that I was kind of doing a mental kind of file Rolodex check here, just thinking of the connection between the idea, the principle, the attitude, and the external manifestation. It almost seems to me like kindness, the connection between the two is somewhat heightened, or maybe in some ways more essential to what kindness is, that there be an external manifestation. There are other dispositions and attitudes that we have that transform us and certainly affect the way we interact with the world and those around us. And it makes all the difference. But there's something about the external manifestation of an interior attitude of kindness that seems to be intrinsically and very essentially connected to the interior disposition. It's about an interaction with someone else,
That's a
an
great point.
external
Then that's a
expression.
good and not all virtues are directly about how we interact with others. So they will always affect it. So for instance,
Mhm.
humility, I think would be a good example of what you're
Mhm.
saying. It will have external manifestations, but there's not as immediate and obvious this necessary connection between having an interior disposition of being humble
Mm.
and how you act. Patience, even patience, is definitely going to have exterior manifestations.
Mm.
Impatience certainly does. I know
Yeah.
that from experience.
Mm.
But patience is more of a how do I deal with things?
Mm.
How do I love St. Thomas's definition of patience. Basically, it's the habit of not being overcome by your sorrow. Right? I
Mm.
mean, this is something that beautiful, powerful into your disposition affects how we act. But kindness, like the virtue of justice, is directly and fundamentally about how we deal with
Mhm.
others.
So it's not enough for us to understand what kindness is. We actually have to do kindness. It has to have an external manifestation. The manifestation might be different depending on circumstances, situation, temperament, etc., but there must be an external manifestation.
I think that's
All
absolutely
right,
true.
so we're definitely going to have to dive
Well,
into the practical
Well,
details
first of
then.
all, let's then just share. There are a couple of resources here. There's a more recent book by Father Lovasik, Lovasik, that's called "The Hidden Power of Kindness." Interestingly, I think much of the background for that came from a book that I just happened to have in my possession by a Father Faber, Faber. I think this book has been republished also. The little gem I'm holding in my hand is from the 1800s. And it's just called Spiritual Conferences. But in the spiritual conferences, his first is on kindness with 4 sections: kindness in general, kind thoughts, kind words, kind actions. So even just the way that he divides that up,
Hmm.
I think is going to be very helpful to us. Say he shares some nice things about what kindness is in general, and then how that is kind of enacted, first of all, in our thoughts, which of course is interior, but then that's going to immediately translate into kind words and kind actions. But just to share one of the opening things that he points out is this isn't a definition yet. We always have to watch. It's one thing to say give a significant characteristic or characterization of something. It's not necessarily the same as defining it. So here he says, man has one power in particular which is not sufficiently dwelt on, and with which we will at present occupy ourselves. It is the power of making the world happy, or at least of so greatly diminishing the amount of unhappiness in it as to make it a quite different world from what it is at present. This power is called kindness.
Wow.
So it's not a definition. You want to define kindness as the power to make the world happy,
Hmm.
but it says something
Hmm.
very kind of provocative,
Hmm.
encouraging, inspiring. Like, ooh, let's think more about this.
Yeah.
If this is a power of making the world happy,
Wow, I actually think that's really amazing that he starts his whole section on kindness with that because it almost sounds like, oh, isn't that a little bit trivial? We're not concerned about making people happy. We're really concerned about being virtuous, being right, now, obviously, the two are connected, but I just love that he hones in on the power to make the world happy.
I do
And
too.
that's an
I do
important
too.
thing. That's
And
actually something that we should be trying to do.
and frankly, sorry for geeking out for a moment here. I think Father Faber would forgive me. There's different ways that the term happy is used. And obviously, in the most important sense, we can't simply, quote,
Make,
make others
yeah.
happy.
Hmm.
um, and deeper happiness, as all the good spiritual masters, all the wise point out, going back to Socrates, Plato, and Aristotle, and great holy men, is that its happiness is human flourishing, which consists most of all in kind of the inner order and integrity
Hmm.
of our actions, and in having virtues both moral and intellectual. And so we can never just bring that about in someone else. However, obviously, at the same time, we immediately point out we can be a real cause that moves in this direction. We can have a real influence that can help people move towards that inner flourishing. And if I may say, I think also sometimes the word happiness is used in a lesser way, but not in a trivial way, where it does refer a little bit more to kind of the feeling, experiencing a certain kind of peace and joy that makes someone feel happy right now. That's something real too, and I think they're both involved here in kindness.
Well, when you were talking about Socrates and Aristotle and Plato, I was totally going to sound like, oh, geek alert, geek alert. But as is 100% of the time, I love when you geek out that way because actually, I just had an incredible brain connection at that moment when you were saying that for the ancients and for all the great spiritual writers, that happiness consists in the interior disposition of
Most of
rectitude,
all, yeah.
most of all, of rectitude. Father Lovasic in his book, and I'm sure Father Faber says this too, Father Lovasic draws heavily on Father Faber's conferences, I think. He says that really what kindness consists in, the injunction to love one's neighbor is based on love of oneself. Love your neighbor as yourself. And Father Lovasic says kindness consists in putting your neighbor in the place of yourself as the object of your affection. So this is not excluding your love for yourself, but bringing them in and loving them the same way you love yourself. Well, it seems to me if you have that interior order that Aristotle and Plato are talking about, that harmony, that flourishing the way it's supposed to be, you are more capable of loving yourself. And so
Mhm.
then it's actually that thing of then if you bring your neighbor in and you love your neighbor as you love yourself, you are actually giving them happiness or extending happiness to them. If your true happiness consists in your interior ordering, proper ordering of passions and growth and virtue, etc., that's your flourishing. That's what
Mm.
allows you to fully
Oh,
love
yeah.
yourself.
This is a really cool point.
So then if you bring your neighbor in and you extend that to your neighbor, you are actually extending happiness to them by your
All right, let me try
kindness.
to let me. That's really neat. Let me try to say that back. Happiness, human happiness, most of all, consists in kind of the right interior order of the soul. That's a huge point from Plato and the Republic, among other so many other places in great thinkers. All right, so if human happiness is most of all in this interior order of the soul,
Okay, interior order of the soul. Okay, that's the phrase I want to remember.
okay,
Interior order of the
which
soul.
again can be expressed in other ways. I
Yeah.
mean, the moral virtues
Hmm.
are having
Sure.
right order in your
Hmm.
desires and so forth. And then here, gosh, I don't want to get distracted and go off on a tangent, but this isn't a tangent. Aristotle so wonderfully when he talks about friendship is saying that you're willing the good of others. To really be able to will the good of others, you have to be willing the good to yourself, which means fundamentally you have to be living the good yourself. Or in any case, we're more able to will the good to others, live with others as friends to the extent that we are doing the good ourselves, loving the good ourselves, doing the good ourselves. Real friendship is virtue. Most important friendship is virtuous friendship. You're only capable of having a relationship, the deeper kind of relationship we so long for, to the extent that we have right order in our soul. So
Hmm.
I think this is the connection that you're seeing there. How we turn towards others is always fundamentally formed by, framed by, energized by our own interior life, who we are, what we want for ourselves. So if you're going, and this is you mentioned Father Lovasic, this is very much a Father Faber point, that kindness very much is a reality of loving another as you love yourself, putting the other in the place of yourself. This is the interior disposition.
Hmm.
So here we have a beautiful point, an inspiration, and a prompt, a motivation for us to try to be better. We can only do that towards others to the extent that we're doing it
Hmm.
ourselves.
Hmm.
Very simply.
This is a little bit jumping to what maybe ought to be the end of a conversation, but it strikes me right now that this attitude toward kindness, that it's an expression of an interior, the right ordering of interior dispositions, actually becomes the check that keeps kindness from being this kind of almost horrific bloodletting, type of thing of just, well, or kind of a lack of boundaries. Sometimes people are afraid of kindness as being as a way that it's very hard to maintain personal boundaries. Psychologically and
Mm-hmm.
emotionally, it's very bad for us if we overflow the right boundary. But if kindness is really an expression of the interior proper ordered dispositions, that will become the check on staying within the appropriate boundaries of our expression and interaction with our neighbor. and being able to truly bring them in because we really have this conviction or we have this awareness of the proper ordering of things.
Absolutely, absolutely. And I think another side of that is that also this prevents is, I mean, you're saying how kindness at times can kind of almost get out of hand and be this amazingly kind of this very demanding thing where
Mhm.
people don't respect boundaries and pour themselves out. Another aspect of the problem of kindness today is it's amorphous. Literally, that's an English word from the Greek that means without form, as though kindness can be just any way you want it to be, or it's just a matter of making someone else feel good. Whereas true kindness is always, of course, rooted in the truth of what real human happiness is. So kindness isn't just making someone feel good, massaging someone's feelings or emotions. It's actually trying, while it does have to do with how they feel, it's rooted in the truth of what, as it were, should be consoling to them, what should make them feel good.
Mhm.
And so real kindness is kind of a call to them to become themselves. It's not, for instance, going to affirm evil. It's
Mhm.
not going to be blind to the bad things or disorder. And that's kindness is, I'm not saying it's going to parachute in necessarily and be hyper judgmental, but it is going to always be rooted in the truth and be a drawing somebody towards that truth, kind of calling them up to be their true selves.
Mhm.
So again, I think a modern misconception, an understandable one would have been, well, just be kind, which more can then just kind of go towards do whatever it takes to make the person comfortable right now. Well, it's not kind to make someone feel comfortable about doing evil, for
Mhm.
instance,
Mhm.
right? And this is why when Aristotle talks about a virtue he calls friendliness, he says friendliness is always rooted in the truth. The friendly person has to be willing to even make the other person somewhat uncomfortable in order to live in the truth and draw the other person towards the truth. Exact same thing we're going to say here about kindness. The kind person has to be willing to even be called unkind, which you might well be called today. Well, that was unkind. Where in kindness, you are actually, while trying to maybe say console a person, you are also helping that person see maybe why he is suffering right now due to certain misbehavior, for
Mhm.
instance, right? So
Mhm.
kindness is not amorphous. It's always written in the rooted in the moral truth of what true human flourishing is. Does that make
Mhm.
sense?
Yeah, it does make sense. It's hard. It's complicated because I feel like it keeps pressing a tangent in different direction. I really want to kind of go back and just talk about like using this notion of kindness and actually looking at acts of kindness.
Well, let's
I
do
would like
that.
to do that. But before we move on to that, it just strikes me you say sometimes because it's about real human flourishing, about the proper interior ordering of dispositions, you said sometimes true kindness is what is an expression of what ought to be making them happy. But it seems that kindness has a unique role in expressing that ought because we can express that ought intellectually to
Great
them,
point.
but the expression of the ought, what ought someone ought to do through the medium of love seems to be the combination that produces kindness. Because there are many ways of expressing an ought. And very often, what we discover is when we express an ought to someone, it's actually perceived as something that is oppressive to them,
Aggressive, even. Yeah.
aggressive, or in a way,
Offensive.
use the word judgmental or
Hmm, hmm.
judgmental
In a negative
in a
sense.
negative
Yeah.
sense in a way that actually alienates the person.
Hmm,
Whereas kindness
hmm.
seems to have that intellectual awareness of what the ought is, but actually suffused with love. Maybe that's the treating someone else as you love yourself.
Yeah.
And therefore it becomes
Absolutely.
kindness and not just an intellectual breaking down of what's actually good for you, but it's always comes through the
Exactly.
filter of love.
Well, okay. Let's go back to. I want to just share a few words from Father Faber of when he most directly says what he thinks kindness is, and it fits exactly with what you just said. Here, I'm just giving a couple lines from him. It's the overflowing of self upon others. We put others in the place of self. I think this is the key line, and we treat them as we should wish to be treated ourselves. Now, this is it can sound okay. So ho hum. What kind? Golden rule. Well,
That's why it's
golden rule ever
golden.
be ho hum. We treat them as we should wish to be treated ourselves. We always want to be treated lovingly kindly. And we can throw in another word here, gently. And I have to say, just what's coming to my mind right there is of course going to be the perfect example of this, is our Lord. When he's interacting with people, clearly he is astoundingly kind. He is always kind. It's so complete, it's not amorphous. It's very much rooted in a clear understanding of what real happiness is. But you might say people should, if they have at all eyes to see, experience it as love, because it's exactly as you would want to be treated yourself. If you were going to be corrected, you'd absolutely want to be very gently held and in your eyes gently turned towards a problem. And so that is this key aspect here, I think, of loving another as you love yourself. Okay, so it's rooted in, hopefully, a true understanding of what life is calling us to, what we're called to by human nature, what we're called to as Christians. We're striving after that. That's what we want for ourselves. True love of self is seeking true greatness. And so we look to another. And again, this amazing thing. And this takes us to the type of thing we have to talk about when we're talking about true friendship. The ability of the human person to have an attitude towards another as towards oneself. Only this is true love, or love in the full sense, where you really can look upon another and have a disposition and effective movements towards that person as though he were yourself.
Mm.
In which case, then you can be so gentle and here, then we would say kind. So the term kindness is particularly capturing how we act towards another person that we are loving like ourselves, and
Mhm.
treating the
Mhm.
way we would want to always be treated, both in when things are going well and in our problems.
I think that's a great way of capturing what these particular acts of kindness we're going to talk about, what it's rooted in. I'd like to just go back for a second to the golden rule, because we said
Hmm.
that do to others what you would want them to do for you, or look at others the way you would want. I wonder if we say want there, if there's also another way of looking at that. It's doing unto others the way we experience ourselves as being loved by ourselves. Because love from other people, we want love from other people. It's always complicated. Do they really love me? I'm not sure if they feel that. Is that how they express it? Like, so we're always a little bit on uncertain ground when we're experiencing love from other people. When we look at our love for ourselves, we feel it directly and unfiltered. Right. Now, obviously, we can all have strange
Right,
relationships
right,
with
sure.
ourselves and how we love one, but we do have this very, that's what we mean. And so I wonder if that's part of the reason that injunction says, love your neighbor as yourself, because the as yourself part is the place where we actually really have a direct experience of what that means. Whereas it's complicated with the love we feel from other people, and they're mixed motives and things like that. But with ourselves, it's pretty clear. Okay, now do you know what that feels like? Good. Now go do that to
Hmm.
others. You know what I
Hmm.
mean? It's like directing our gaze to the experience that we can really say, you know what that feels like. Great. Now you know what you need to do. You know what I
I
mean?
do. I do. I mean, may I just give a slightly different angle then? Just, I think it's very complimentary to that is maybe sometimes it's most clear to us what we want for ourselves when we're
Yes.
not getting it
Yes.
from
From,
someone else.
yeah,
And we just have
that's
this
true.
feeling of,
Yeah.
gosh, could you have just said that a little bit more gently?
Yes.
Could you have just, been a
Been a little
little
bit more
warmer
understanding.
here? And of course, so
Yeah.
often we're not that way towards others, but that is interestingly, I think, an angle into experiencing what we want. Treat others the way you want to be treated. Well,
Yeah.
again, very often, the way it becomes evident to us how we want to be treated is when others are not being kind to us.
Sure. Yeah.
And,
And I suppose we want others to treat us in a certain way that maybe we don't treat ourselves. So saying how
right,
you
no,
want to
exactly,
be
right,
treated
right.
actually
Yeah,
can make up for the deficiency of our own appropriate self-love.
or
Make
right, yeah,
clear what's missing or what we really want and therefore need to work
right.
on
What we
even in our
really want
own
for ourselves,
is better than what we actually do.
because
Yeah.
sometimes even if someone says,
Yeah.
well,
Yeah. Yeah.
treat them the way you would treat yourself. Well, okay, fine. No, I don't necessarily treat myself so well, so I'll treat them that way.
Yeah. Yeah. Yeah.
And
Exactly.
what
Yeah. So
what
maybe
what do
saying
we
want
in our
is
heart
actually the
really
best.
want? All right,
Yeah.
so let's get practical. I want to get challenging here because I think this is a big one, and this has a lot of implications in the home, and so we might be already starting to think, well, how do we raise kind children? Well, I think this is pretty straightforward. And boy, you can see this in experience. By and large, it's not an absolute universal. The differences in temperament make a difference in how this is felt and expressed. So we have to understand there's differences in how the felt kindness is going to be expressed and felt. But kind people form kind people. I mean, by and large, I mean, how often have I seen a very kind person and just got, and then my mind moves just kind of quickly to, and wow, that person's parent or parents is amazingly kind. And so it's not a
Mhm.
surprise that this is the type of thing that is naturally passed on. And so, again, sounds obvious, almost like, okay, ho hum. For those of us who are parents, those of us who are grandparents, those who are forming the young, those of us teachers in any way, the vast majority of us, to really take a look. I really want to call us to self examination today. Did people experience us as kind?
Mm.
And what could we do to deepen that, to make it better, to improve that? And there's so many. I mean, of course, we need to ask ourselves then: are we having kind thoughts? Are we having kind dispositions? And we're going to have to work on that. But maybe we can start with and this is so often the case. This is a principle we refer to so often in the household. Exterior actions are signs of interior realities. So we've talked about this in so many important contexts. Just how do you form virtue? How do you grow in virtue? Or the importance of manners. And we always like to come back to that key philosophical principle of St. Thomas Aquinas says it is simply human that you express your interior dispositions in external actions. Those external actions express them, but they also turn around then and cultivate them. And so by
Yeah, that's very
teaching
important.
manners, there's always a little bit of the principle of fake it till you make it. I think it is very important to remind ourselves of this. We genuflect in church. We say please or thank you. We stand up in the presence of the elderly. We speak words of praise, even if we're not necessarily feeling that way. Good manners, good breeding, human nature in society calls us to take these forms, these external ways of acting that are fitting expressions of what, in any case, should be our interior dispositions.
Mhm.
And we do them as a way of trying to cultivate that interior disposition. And so I
Mhm.
think here, interestingly, when I say, well, gosh, how do you get interior disposition of kindness? One way is by simply taking up, choosing to do these exterior actions that are objectively what a kind person would do right now.
Mhm.
And that is a way of cultivating, reminding ourselves, bringing it about that we have more of that kind disposition toward
Mhm.
them.
Yeah, so what you sounds like what you're saying is if the starting point is either a spirit of kindness or a desire for a
Yes,
spirit
good.
of kindness,
Hmm.
then the exterior actions will begin to foster a greater kindness in us.
Thank you. Exactly. So let's begin right now by saying, okay, can we resolve to have a, a desire for kindness?
Mhm.
We're going to
As a
cultivate
starting point.
kindness.
Yeah.
And then we start thinking about, well, what would I act like if I really did have that interior
Mm.
disposition? And then those actions are going to help me get that interior disposition.
Mhm. Yeah, excellent. So I wonder if talking a little bit about external actions of kindness, maybe if there's so many that we could talk about, maybe a way of kind of making a list of certain acts of kindness. I don't know. I don't know if you would agree with this. If you want to do it differently, just say, and we'll just do something different. But I was just wondering if maybe we could start making that list by saying, tell me some of the ways you would want someone to be kind to you. And I'll make a list. And then we can use that list as a point of this kind of distill it into acts of kindness, right?
Absolutely, and of course, well, I'm going to ask you, and you're going to add to the list. But to me, here is and of course, this is going to overlap with manners because a big part of manners
Is
is to cultivate
kindness.
kindness. This is
Absolutely. I mean, that's the whole point, right?
so,
True manners,
and yeah, and not the whole point; it's a huge part of it.
yeah, are
So,
rooted in kindness.
but
Yeah.
on first coming into the presence of other people, this is a huge thing in human embodied presence. What do we do first thing in the morning? What do we do when we walk into the room? What do we do when we see
Mhm.
that person, that we pass that person when we're walking? The gold standard of human presence is always bodily presence,
Mm.
which it is. So let's say that again, just to really bear that in mind. The gold standard of human presence is always to be bodily present
Mm.
with people.
It sounds
Well,
obvious, but we definitely need to say
and we
that
do.
nowadays.
Bodily presence is not permanent. In other words, we got to move around in our bodies. And so we're constantly going to be coming into the presence of people.
I love that.
And so
So it's
what do we
recurring
do
experience. Yeah.
on every single, I mean, when we walk out this door after we finish this discussion, we're going to start, quote, we say bumping into people. We don't mean physically bumping into, although it is a physical coming in contact with people. And I tend to say this to my students when I'm saying something about manners. You all don't realize that when you pass other people, you actually don't have the habits that good manners in other cultures would have cultivated in you of how you greet, how you look upon someone. And here I'm going to say a five-letter word in many ways, to me, call me crazy, I think is a kind of epicenter of kindness. Guess what five-letter word I'm going to say now? You're already guessing it. When you come into the presence of someone, the first and most obvious way that you are kind towards that person, of course, is, oh, you've written it down, dear.
Smile. Yeah.
The power of the smile can, can seem trite, but I wanna fight that. I wanna
So, what are
push
you
back
conveying
right
when you
now.
smile? Tell me why that is at the epicenter. What are you conveying when you
I think you're
smile?
conveying everything that's most important. Life is good. I'm happy to be alive. I'm blessed to be alive. I'm grateful to be alive. And I'm grateful to be seeing you and coming into your presence right now. So I smile.
So, maybe part of that is, and I'm grateful that you're alive.
Absolutely. I want to fight against. I think at times when we think maybe, well, some people, you know, bad men can smile. Anybody can smile. That's easy. Obviously, it's much more important than just smiling. And people that don't emphasize and appreciate deeper things do make a big deal out of smiling. And when I said all that, so what? That's all irrelevant. None of that means, in any way, implies that smiling isn't a key aspect of what we do. I grant there are different practices in different cultures, and it's not all about smiling. You don't have to smile all the time,
And so there are certain
but
circumstances where it's not appropriate to make that kind of contact,
sure,
right? But
absolutely.
we're taking for granted that the kind of environment we're talking about is one of your community. Let's say first your family. So literally, you had mentioned the coming into someone's bodily presence in the morning, first thing in the morning. That's something that recurs all the time. Do we smile at those we meet in the first thing in the morning, which is our very little children? Don't disdain the fact that your little child deserves that, or your grumpy teenager, or teaching your grumpy teenager when they encounter you the first time in the morning. What we do is we smile. So the daily encounters of the household community, then think about your parish or church community, think about your school community. So let's exclude those situations that would preclude that kind of smiling. To talk about city environments,
Right.
dangerous environments, let's just
Which
talk about.
as a quick sidebar, though, it is a sad commentary, especially
Yeah.
on today's urban life. That sometimes for safety,
Yes.
especially if you're a young
Yes.
lady, you can't just be smiling at people that
Exactly.
you pass.
It's a
And
sad
and
thing.
and and so we're not in any way questioning that. Prudence always has to reign. Ultimately, I do think in the right context, being able to smile at strangers is certainly something we want to do. I almost want to say it's like, yeah, if in certain circumstances you got to hold it in, hold it back. Okay, we're going to do that. That's, but I'm ready to smile. I
Hmm.
want to smile. Why? I think here let's be intentional. Let's be conscious. It fits with everything we're saying as an expression of kindness, as an expression of I am willing to look at you and treat you as I want to be treated myself.
Hmm.
This is as an act of love. And again, beginning in the home, I really want to suggest and challenge people the first thing in the morning or the first thing when you see each other again after any type of space of absence, after someone's been away at work, someone went out shopping, whatever, we come back together. We can become so pragmatic. We can become so absorbed in what we're
Mm.
doing. But what an astounding way to cultivate in ourselves a spirit of gratitude, a spirit of of really recognizing the goodness of existence, how wonderful it is to be alive, how wonderful it is to be together. I think, will not heaven, in some sense, be a long, consistent smile?
Mhm.
And so to bring that in, the poor child who isn't smiled upon. Now, what's most important is, of course, that the person have that disposition. And it can have, it might not be some big beaming,
Mm.
overflowing physical expression, but,
Some bodily way of expressing, "It is good that I'm here and that you're here with me."
I just
Mhm.
think teaches volumes about human life.
Mhm.
It
Yeah.
conveys volumes about who
Existence.
you are and the reason to be happy. We're talking about going back to
Yeah.
Father Faber's have the power of making people
People happy.
happy.
He said
I,
making
I,
the
I,
world
I
happy.
really do think when certain people look at you and smile, you have this sense of, wow, my life is that good. Or in any case, that can be our desire. That can be our intention. That when we look upon people in the appropriate context, that our smile is conveying. We want to say, we are so grateful to be here, to be alive, to be together. Now, I've emphasized the smile, but now we just boom, immediately that just overflows into, you know, kind words, kind actions. How are you feeling this morning? You look so well. I hope you're going to have a wonderful day. How are you feeling? So many of both words. Here, let me get that for you. You looked a little stooped. Can I give you a little back rub? You want me to warm up your feet for you? Can I put some water on the kettle for you?
Mhm.
All of these things are
You're saying all the things that you say to me on a regular basis. Do you need me to fill that hot water bottle for you? Yes. That's great.
so. How,
Well,
how are we
that's
doing?
that's that's incredible. So I have as number 1, how we receive other people upon our first encounter or repeated first encounter. Kind of at the epicenter of that is the smile,
Mm,
and that the smile affirms that life is good, that you're happy to be alive, grateful to be seeing you, and grateful that you are alive, and that kind words and kind actions also express that.
exactly.
Mhm.
Exactly. Do
So,
you want to add something else to the list? How are we doing?
well, I just kept going back to me about the smile, and there are certain places that you can't smile anymore. I wonder if we can say there are gradations of smile, and that if the smile is fundamentally conveying the design is good, I'm part of that design, and you're part of that design, then even smiling at a bad guy in the city, now obviously using prudence, there is a way that your smile can convey that without being the smile that is open and inviting, which is the smile you give your
Totally.
child when you
Yep.
encounter them
Yep.
at
Yep. Yep.
breakfast, right?
More
So
friends. Right.
I imagine that the great lovers of God were able to go into the worst places and cities and smile at people. And it didn't make them vulnerable or kind of, play, great, attack that guy. I mean, maybe people felt that, but it was conveying something actually much more powerful that my smile is here to convey the goodness of existence.
Although, can I just jump on a word you just said that really
Yep.
struck me? And I agree with how you used it, but the word vulnerable can be used in different ways. Of
Sure.
course, etymologically, it means able to be wounded.
Wounded.
So you're kind of pointing out you can do it without making yourself unsafe. Although I think we should know that there is always a making oneself vulnerable
Vulnerable.
by
That
being
yes.
kind.
Yes.
Because when you being kind is always real kindness is an opening your heart. It's an opening your heart sincerely. It is opening your heart because you're treating the other as yourself. That immediately makes you vulnerable in a new way. Just like we can say when you have a true friend, you have someone that you love as you love yourself, your vulnerability in life has just doubled. Not only
Mm,
do things bad that happen to you hurt you, but things bad that happen primarily to that person hurt you. You're now
mhm.
more woundable because you have extended your
Your love,
heart.
yes,
So, in a similar way here, it also, we might say, it takes energy. And I'm sure that's part of why people that are just down, that are tired, you don't feel like smiling at people when you pass them.
mhm,
It's like I don't have the
mhm.
energy to reach out to others. And we have to be realistic here. And you referred to there being boundaries, but let's be conscious. I think
Yeah.
recognizing this out loud right now is very important. Sometimes we stretch ourselves a little bit, especially with our friends, especially with our children. And this is the interesting thing. Often it's those that we most take for granted. Spouses don't smile at one another.
Mhm.
Parents don't smile at their children. Siblings don't smile at one another. Even friends don't smile at one
Mhm.
another. People that are just starting to date and are in the glow of falling in love tend to smile more. And then that can tend to be a little bit jading to people
Mhm.
like, oh, great. Well, what do you want something from me? Why are you smiling at me right
Mhm.
now? Which, by the way, is an interesting, I'm sure, for retailers, train the cashier or the people on the floor to make sure you smile at people because they recognize that's going to help draw people in, make them
Mhm.
feel comfortable, whatever. Be that what it is. We're talking about something much richer and much deeper here. Yes, let's train ourselves and others in an appropriate way to smile at people, not because we want them to buy something,
Mhm.
not because we're trying to get something, but because we truly do look upon them with love. Hopefully, by the grace of God,
Mhm.
by experiencing God's love for us, and that often through other humans loving us, we are more and more empowered to take that love to others. Lord, grow our
Mhm.
heart so that we do love others that way
Mhm.
and are willing to give of ourselves and so make
Mhm.
ourselves vulnerable.
I really like the point that you underscored that it takes a lot of energy. It's true. It is hard work. It's a beautiful thing, but it does take energy. And if we don't have the energy for kindness, I think we should be asking ourselves, where are we spending our energy? And I
Good
think in the
point.
world that we live in, the values that the world has, it's encouraging us to spend our energies in other places. And so maybe part of the whole question of kindness is to reevaluate, where are we expending our energy that leaves us empty when it comes to expressing kindness to those who are given to us?
I love that. Can I just tell you that just made jump into my mind a quotation you just saw on my door as we walked in? Because every now and then when I'm struck by a quotation, I love to pop it up. And this is from Wendell Berry's Jaber
We're
Crow.
we're actually in John's office, just so you know, he doesn't post these things on the front door of our
It's a
house.
good point. Good point. Maybe I should. Maybe that would be a way of being kind to people.
Oh,
Drop a little Wendell Berry on them as they're coming to visit. Jaber Crow says to love anything good at any cost is a bargain.
it's an amazing line. Holy
And
mackerel.
but at any cost. And the thing is, of course, the undercurrent, the astounding, throbbing insight behind that is it's often at a big cost.
Yeah.
And that's why to love anything good at any cost is a bargain where you just said, What are we doing? As it were, where are we
Yeah.
spending our money? As it were, where are we spending our
Energies. Yeah.
energy? Are we
Yeah.
spending it on things that don't matter? So kindness is demanding because love is demanding, because being human and living a truly human life is demanding. And so why do we see this among the non-negotiables in the household? Because it is so central to making our life in the household what it should be. And imagine
Mhm.
a
Mhm.
kind home.
Yeah.
And I know some parents will be like discouraged. Oh my gosh, my children are always at one another's throats. Don't be overly hard on yourself. If it seems at times that children they're going through stages. They tend to be a little self-oriented. And so, it's okay. They might not be paragons of kindness, but don't give up. Steady onward. You're not doing it just for the effect on others anyway.
Mhm.
It's the way we want to be. As in
Right.
the home, the marriage is always the kind of energy, the dynamo from which everything flows. We need to
Mhm.
start with our spouse. Are we truly kind?
Mhm.
Where our children see from the man's perspective, I always say kind words. I'm never sarcastic. I'm never mean. I'm always taking care gently as I would want to be gently taking care of myself. This, of course, is what then they'll expect in their own friendships and relationships and marriages. And it's even if it doesn't seem the right now, it's what they do. They are seeing, and it's affecting them. That our home be a home of kindness, first in the interior disposition, in our thoughts, in our words, in our actions. Let's just
Mhm.
look around the home for different ways we've just suggested, which to me, I think are kind of the most important. Let's connect this with manners. Let's connect this with manners. Always manners are fundamentally, you said this earlier,
Way
about
of expressing
cultivating
kindness. Yeah.
kindness, which is such a gift. But if we're aware of that and we act that way, what a difference it will make.
I want to go back to the question about children and how to foster an attitude of kindness in children. But before we go there, can I just ask you for two other things that you would want people to treat you that way? we talked about how you're greeted, which was smile and kind words and kind actions. Obviously, kind words and actions can be applied to other categories. Can you just give me two other things that you would like to be extended towards you when you think about?
Okay, two just jumps to mind.
All right.
Want to be affirmed, to be praised in little ways. When I do something good, that there's just a kind word, of, way to go, or
Mm-hmm.
you're so good at that. I
Mm-hmm.
love it when you do that. These are kind words
Mm-hmm.
that just so make you feel better about yourself. And the other is
Mm-hmm.
simply the flip side of that. When I fail, when I make a mistake, be it bigger or little, please still be kind to me.
Mm-hmm.
Please don't kind of jump on it. There you go again. Tease you, whatever it be.
Mm-hmm.
It's this weird side of us. Again, you see this in
Mm-hmm.
children, and often it's like even someone starts to misspeak a word, and sometimes people jump. Oh my gosh, what's wrong with you? You just said such.
Mm-hmm.
So, simple little mistakes. Let's be kind in supporting people when they
Mm-hmm.
make a mistake, when they fail. Let's be kind in praising and encouraging people because we want to be encouraged.
Mm-hmm.
We want to be praised when we're doing well. We want to be encouraged when we're failing.
Mhm. Excellent. That's great. So your second point, I wrote it down as affirmed. Affirming people is a
Hmm.
form of kindness. Praise is one of the ways we do that, but maybe that's a kind or a species of words that we use to affirm. But
Hmm.
there are many ways in
Hmm.
which your goodness can be affirmed. And so I guess we would
Hmm.
say finding external actions that affirm the goodness of the person, whether it's praising them for a job well done or thanking them for
Hmm.
an
Hmm.
expression of, labor on your behalf, love on your behalf, et cetera. I think that I would kind of say affirmation in the sense of being affirmed that you're good.
Yeah.
And then
Right.
number
Right.
3, when you said being merciful when you have failed, I kind of describe that as supportive. So an attitude of
Hmm.
supporting the other person and encouragement. So our kind words and actions that are geared toward support and encouragement when someone has failed.
It's huge. Absolutely.
Yeah.
Would you do you have anything to add to the list?
Well, I mean, we could go on for forever and ever because in a lot of ways, there's so much that we want that we realize. And it would be lovely for everybody to sit down and just make their own list and ask, rather than saying, I want this, or people giving it to me, I want this. How do I give these to others? So
Hmm.
use it as your springboard, not for what you demand, but what you start giving. And this doesn't mean you can't ask for it or it's unreasonable for you to expect that these things be given to you, but that we use it as our springboard to say, and now I shall do those things. So,
Hmm.
I don't
Yeah.
really want to add to that partially
That's
because
totally
I'm
fine.
like, oh my
Yeah.
gosh, these are
Yeah.
so amazing, and you totally hit a chord with me by just bringing those up. I want to just before we finish, go talk about fostering kindness in children. I think that there are kind of natural dispositions in children that tend away from kindness. And there are two ways I think in which it's very important for us to foster kindness in children. One is by being kind to them always. Again, that doesn't mean not requiring something of them.
Sure.
It
Of
doesn't
course.
mean not having, a non-negotiable "this must be done," but that the spirit is always one of kindness. That's very, very, very important. I don't think it necessarily has the consequence of your children being kind. It gives them the very important experience as being the
Hmm.
object of
Hmm.
kindness. And I think sometimes we need to actually explicitate it to our children. Like my mother would always say, and one thing to remember, it was really hard for me when I started having children and they're like saying nasty stuff to each other or fighting. I would be so unbelievably stressed out going, oh my gosh, do you realize this is your relationship with your sister? And then I just realized, when 8 and 9-year-olds are fighting about
Take a
something,
deep.
experience it very differently
Yep.
than if we were saying the same thing to an adult, right? So
Hmm.
this is not to say it's not important and doesn't need to be corrected, but it's not necessarily cataclysmic. But I think my mother used to always say to us in those circumstances, never hurt anyone's heart. And she
Mm.
just said that
Mhm.
phrase over and over and over again. And then down to a very, like a direct, you may not say that to your sister.
Mm.
Or that's very embarrassing to somebody if you
Mhm.
point that out
Mhm.
about them.
Mhm.
And so I do think as parents, we need to one, model it for them, but then we should also give them specific instruction. And, what are the non-negotiables in your family? We never say that kind of thing. That word may never be used, et
Mhm.
cetera. But I
Mhm.
think it would be good to put it in the context of not just, you may never say that word, is never hurt someone's heart, so that they realize that this rule is in place because we're actually
That's
taking care
great.
of people. And then the final thing that I think is essential, and this was in our non negotiables, but I think the key that unlocks the door to teaching children how to be other oriented is actually gratitude. If they know how to say thank you, that means they realize that they're not the center of the world. It makes them be aware that there is another person outside of their sphere. Child's sphere is naturally egocentric, and we want to start opening that sphere to include others. And gratitude is the first way
Amen.
that we begin to experience that. So I think gratitude and kindness actually are very closely
I
connected.
think
And
so
maybe we
too.
should remember that for ourselves as well, that if we're struggling with, or if we feel like acts of kindness or something that we're kind of applying and doing and checking the box, say to yourself, are we being appropriately grateful for the good
Great
that's in
point.
our life? And if we are, I think will be easier for us to be kind.
I think that's an incredibly good point. Incredibly good point. Thank you so much. I just like to end then with a word of encouragement. Don't be afraid. Let's not be afraid to examine ourselves. If we came from a background and certain habits we've already formed that are frankly just not so kind, well, we're going to begin where we are. Begin with an honest self examination
Mm.
and ask how we can improve. Let's ask our spouse, our friends, our mentor, hey, do I come across as kind? Just in the external forum, how might I be more kind?
Mm.
There's kind of a unpleasant acronym for a look on someone's face if they don't look very happy. I think
Mm.
it's good. It's not the be all and end all, but ask ourselves, how do we hold our face when we're not
Resting.
when we're resting
Yes.
and not really doing something? And again, some people just by their very body, their somata, it might you know
Be
uh,
less inviting than others.
which is okay, but it's not all
But
bad to ask ourselves,
do I practice?
do I try to be aware
Sure.
of what I'm conveying to others? And frankly, because I'm also conveying it to myself. What's in my countenance is saying to everyone kind of what I'm feeling slash even thinking about life. And again, sometimes
Mhm.
there might be a disconnect and we might not realize that perfectly. Get just another thing to be aware of. But I love your point, dear. It's about gratitude because it's all gift.
Mm.
We are so
Mhm.
loved. We need to learn to love.
And
And
that's why we can love
kindness
others.
is a beautiful part of trying to do that.
Yeah, absolutely.
Thanks for the conversation,
Oh,
dear.
here's for more kindness in our life. Yes.
All right. Thanks for joining us. Thanks for tuning in this episode of The Intentional Household. If you've enjoyed this, please like, subscribe, and leave a rating or review. If you have any topic requests, please send them to lifecraftgroup@gmail.com. For our Wednesday reflections, free courses, reading groups, and live events, please visit life-craft.org.